Good afternoon, friends. We have gathered here today for the release of the second quarter estimates of GDP. You put that on the screen also. And Chief Statistician of India and Secretary, Ministry of Statistics and Program Implementation, Dr. T.C.A Anant is here, and DG Central Statistics Office, GC Manna Ji, and we have his team with Mr. NBS Ranganathan Ji, Mr. Sunil Jain, and Madam Rajeshwari. I hand it over to you, sir.
Thank you. First of all, let me thank you for all for coming. We have released the second quarter estimates for GDP for 2016-17. Just to put it in context, please understand second quarter means is the period starting from 1st July to 30th September. Oh, sorry. Oh, it refers to the period between 1st July and 30th September. So let me just briefly sum up the highlights of this release, and after that I'll be happy to take questions from all of you which you may have about this. The first thing is the growth in GDP at 2011-12 prices or constant prices is estimated at 7.3% in the second quarter. This is lower than what we had seen last year at 7.6%, but slightly higher than what we had seen in the first quarter of 7.1%. The growth in GVA at basic prices is estimated at 7.1%. Which is lower compared to 7.3% of last year, and it is, I don't have the figure of what the it's there in the details of what the first quarter figure was, but it's slightly lower than that in the first quarter. These are the major overall numbers. Briefly, I'll summarize what the major highlights which you may want to take away. Agriculture does a little better than last year. And this is largely because of, as expected, because of the improved monsoon. Sown area has improved, and therefore the first advanced estimate for agriculture has led to a rise in the second quarter estimate of GDP, and what amounts to the first quarter of the agricultural year, which is in India calculated as July to June, that estimate has gone up. Mining and quarrying has come in worse than last year, and this was shown in the IIP figures throughout the second quarter. Mining and quarrying has been coming in negative. Please understand, this is on the back of a very sharp increase in mining and quarrying in the year 2015-16. So one of the reasons the GDP performance this year has been a little poorer than last year. Manufacturing also has shown a slowdown in growth. This is in large measure because at this stage of GDP computation, the only indicators which are available to us for computing GVA in manufacturing and GDP from manufacturing are the index of industrial production and the quarterly estimates filed by a small set of companies which file advance estimates. Both of these sets of indicators compared to last year show a slightly lower growth. That's why the manufacturing growth has come in lower. The details are there in our press release. I don't want to stress in each sector what has happened, but I think this was one of the main points which I did want to emphasize. In manufacturing, I should point out one other thing. The poor performance in IIP, when you look at it in disaggregated terms, had very poor growth rates in certain sectors like fabricated metal products, furniture manufacturing, and apparel, all of which play a major role in the informal or quasi-corporate no, not quasi-corporate, informal or manufacturing sector. This segment in IIP showing poor growth meant that the household manufacturing segment has shown much poorer growth this time compared to the previous year. So that's another element which you may want to keep in mind when you're interpreting these results. The details are there in our press release in some form. So I'll stop here and leave it open to you to ask
The
questions.
floor is now open for questions. Kindly raise your hand when your term comes. Please give your name and organization.
You. You've pointed to an increased growth in the agricultural sector. Is that the main driver of the 7.3% growth? If you could just talk about that. And you've said that manufacturing has come in lower. Could you quantify how you see this going forward?
Well, see, agriculture, the first advance estimate shows a higher number. So compared to 2% last year, we are getting an agricultural GVA growing at 3.3%. Now, that is one of the factors which has, if you like, kept up the GDP growth rate. If you look at the overall growth rate, it is lower than last year. So, all of these effects are, in a sense, some effects which tend to raise it, some which tended to reduce it. So, I've tended to give you both what has increased and what has decreased. Going forward, very hard to say because we don't have any data at the moment, but agriculture, I expect these efforts, the effects will be continued going forward as well.
Yes, please.
So, Nikita from Cogensis. So you mentioned about a slowdown in the informal sector. Just wanted to understand that with demonetization now in the quarters going ahead, because the informal sector is likely to be impacted more. So could there be a further slowdown on that account? And is it possible to quantify that?
Look, that's very hard to say at this stage. The elements which I talked about in IIP growth are part of the long-run patterns of IIP. How will they go ahead going forward? Very hard to predict at this stage. Demonetization is even more complicated because at this stage there is virtually no data. So what will be the impact is as a statistician, I'm unable to tell you what the answer will be now.
Sir, a follow-up question. Timsi from CNBC TV 18. A lot of rating agencies, a lot of parallel economists have very clearly they've said, even our past Prime Minister Manmohan Singh has said that GDP is likely to decline by 2% post-demonetization. How do you see such comments and such reports?
You see, everybody makes assumptions. Those assumptions are based on their worldview and their way of looking at things. All I can say is at this point, there is no data available for you to actually concretely make a statement of these effects. Assumptions can lead people to all sorts of conclusions, and I don't want to contest at that level because that's really not the statistician's job. I would rather suggest we wait for the data and you will get the answer better at that time.
Yes, please.
The standard.
Yeah.
Let's talk about the third quarter. You won't have advance estimates from companies for the third quarter estimates till February. On what basis will you do your advance estimates for the entire financial year before the budget comes in? And on what numbers will the budget numbers be determined now?
Okay, I think you're mixing up two things. The third quarter estimate will be released as we have now put out on the website the advance release calendar on the 28th of February, by which time we will have all the data for the third quarter from corporate filings and so on. The advance estimate we are now proposing to give in the beginning of January, we've also indicated that in that press release, will be calculated on the same methodology which advance estimate is always calculated, which is the benchmark indicator method. The benchmark which will be used is the provisional estimate for the full year which we had released at the end of May. And the indicators which we have are the same indicators which we used for the advance estimate earlier as well. the data will be up to the period of December. So whatever corporate data is available till the month of December will be used, along with all other indicators which are available, which will be used at that time. But essentially, the estimate which will be released in the beginning of January will be based on the data which is available in the month of December and the principles and rules governing calculation of benchmark. Look, I'll tell you. We will have at the stage of the release of the advance estimate will be what is available in the month of December. Now, that is a correct statistical calculation. Based on your assumptions about how things are, you are more than welcome to do that. I, as a statistician, will only to comment about if your assumptions later bear out to be wrong. But I'm telling you how we will do it. The method is a valid statistical technique. And by the way, that applied even to the estimate which was released earlier in the month of February. We had data up to January. When we made that advance estimate, we had data up to the month of January, which was not the full data for December, because it takes almost 6 weeks for a lot of data of December to come into play. So at every stage, a benchmark indicator thing is you take all the data is available and project. I think she's been trying to also. Yeah. Okay.
Sir, Nikita again, from Cogensis again. So just wanted to understand that while comparing growth in this in the July-September quarter from the previous quarter, you mentioned that GVA has slowed down while GDP has picked up. So how should one read into that? Because GVA shows a slowdown.
There are two elements to this. If you recall, when the first quarter numbers had come out, we had pointed out that one of the factors behind the slower growth in GDP was the fact that subsidies had grown very sharply in the first quarter. I had also mentioned to many of you that subsidies is a policy instrument of the government. If you look at the data in the second quarter, the growth in subsidies is very sharply compressed. So the same factor which led GDP to slow down in the first quarter now has worked in the reverse direction to lead to a increase in GDP. This is fairly normal because government has a certain degree of flexibility and there is a certain policy choice which goes into as to when should they deliver certain class of government expenditure. It shows up in the GDP calculations appropriately. So this is just the way things unfold.
Your data also clearly reflects private sector investments, which have been on a slowdown for quite some time. Both the government and all the ministers have been urging private sector to improve upon their investments. What is the clear indication right now in the second quarter estimates? How are private sector investments placed as compared to previous quarter and last year?
I don't know whether I have separately private and corporate. See, the gross fixed capital formation compared to last year has slowed down, but its breakup separately on public and private I don't have at the moment. So I'm not in a position to respond as to specifically what the private dimension of this is. The reason why it has slowed down is essentially, if you look at the data from which it is calculated, remember again, this is at this stage principally indicator driven. The data for this was in IIP, the capital goods segment.
Where would we end this year? How much growth can we expect?
Look, I would defer that. Give me the leeway of a month because I've committed now to release a number on the which we come up to December and exercise of projection. At the moment, we only have a half-year estimate. We'll do a proper projection for the year and tell you in January.
Sir, Gaurang again from ET now. Sir, with regard to one of the key drivers of growth so far, which has been public investment, if you just talk about how substantial a contributor that has been to the growth figures at that point, and so the demonetization program, you said obviously it'll be predicated on the data which you get at that point. Will you have to factor in maybe any new variables to take into account the impacts of demonetization?
The flexibility to change the manner in which GDP is constructed in any circumstance. In any case is built up from a very detailed computation at a disaggregated level, and it is built up from that. The first point is the full GDP estimate for the year, which is based on disaggregated data for this year, will not be available until next year, January, because that is only when the full accounting data for 16-17 will become available, only when the accounts are closed. At this stage, when we are doing advance estimate, we will basically take the last full estimate and blow it up using rates and ratios. Now, the indicators which we will have are well known. We are not going to get any new indicators at this stage. So the scope for doing anything using new indicators or new methods at this stage does not arise. Oh, public investment, I don't have, as I said, she had asked about private, so I'll make the same answer. I don't have it in front of me. मैं कोशिश करता हूं. मैंने मैन्युफैक्चरिंग ग्रोथ में दो बिंदुओं पे ध्यान रखना जरूरी है. सबसे पहले कि सेकेंड क्वार्टर में जो इंडेक्स ऑफ इंडस्ट्रियल प्रोडक्शन का ग्रोथ था वो मैन्युफैक्चरिंग में नेगेटिव था, -0.9 था मेरे ख्याल से पूरे सेकंड क्वार्टर में. उस पे मैंने ये भी कहा था कि उसके कुछ वर्ग जिसमें मेटल प्रोडक्ट्स, फर्नीचर मैन्युफैक्चरिंग और अपैरल जो छोटी इकाइयों में बनते हैं, उनका आईआईपी में यदि आईआईपी ओवरऑल के हिसाब से देखा जाए तो उनका काफी ओवरऑल आईआईपी से भी ज्यादा नेगेटिव था. और क्योंकि ये छोटे इकाइयों में और जो अनऑर्गेनाइज सेक्टर मैन्युफैक्चरिंग का है, इसमें ये ज्यादा महत्व रखते हैं, अनऑर्गेनाइज सेक्टर का ग्रोथ इसकी वजह से थोड़ा कम रहा. मैन्युफैक्चरिंग सेक्टर में एक मुद्दा और आया जो कांस्टेंट प्राइस ग्रोथ में इफेक्ट करता है. इस क्वार्टर में जो आप लोग कई लोग ने लिखा था, अब डब्ल्यूपीआई इन्फ्लेशन नेगेटिव से पॉजिटिव टेरिटरी में आ गया, तो उसके कारणवश जब हम मैन्युफैक्चरिंग का कांस्टेंट प्राइस एस्टिमेट बनाते हैं, नॉमिनल से जब डिफ्लेट करते हैं, तो जो पहले नंबर थोड़ा ज्यादा दिख रहा था, अब उसके कारणवश कम हो गया. नॉमिनल ग्रोथ रेट आप देखोगे तो उसमें इतना ज्यादा असर नहीं दिखता जितना ओवरऑल में दिखता है. पर ऑन द होल मैन्युफैक्चरिंग ग्रोथ रेट पिछले साल की तुलना में थोड़ा कम आता है, क्योंकि मैंने इधर डिटेल्स दिए थे. पिछले साल के हमने मैन्युफैक्चरिंग ग्रोथ रेट जो दी थी 9.2% दी थी, और इस साल 7.1% पे आ गई है. Q2
No, negative नहीं. Q1 also first year Q1 was 7.3. Now it has become 9.1. Yeah. This is there in statement 1 of today's release. You see, I'll repeat the figures at constant price. For the previous year, 15-16, let me talk about Q2 first, what we have released just now. Previous year it was 9.2% growth in GVA. This has declined to, as Secretary has said, this time to 7.1%. If we look at Q1, there is a reverse trend. Previous year it was 7.3%, now it has become 9.1%.
So if you look at the half year as a whole, manufacturing growth between the two are not that different, but quarter-wise, there is a change in the this year. Yeah, I think that's good.
Raymond Zong from the Wall Street Journal. I know you just said that there's no way to change how GDP is constructed suddenly. But as you know, the informal sector is by definition very difficult to measure. And it's also the informal sector that demonetization is probably going to hit the most. So is it possible that in the official figures, growth will actually be stronger than it really is because you're not able to capture that?
See, let me try to answer this. Let me break it up into three elements. The informal sector, which is the household segment of manufacturing, in our national accounts framework is captured by the following method. We do NSS surveys of informal sector. The survey on which this GDP is based was done during the year 10-11. And that survey estimate is then in years subsequent to the base year are grown by a variety of indicators which includes data from the annual survey of industries and other sources. Now, we have done an informal sector survey in 2014-15. There is currently a survey focusing on the services sector in the field. Those data will become available in the course of the next year or two. So we will get to know the information from the full informal sector only after these surveys are. But our indicators, which is both IIP, Annual Survey of Industries, and the various tax collection data which we use for retail trade and so on, will be available earlier as well. And you will get to see sales tax data by the end of this year.
Anyone else? You have one more?
Update us on the status of the back series.
You better respond to this.
Back series, I think that question has been posed again and again. We are aware of the problem and interest of the public at large. We have done our calculations. What we are planning is that maybe within a month's time or so, first we will have a little in-house discussion and then we will go for uploading the information in our website.
Okay, I think what happened is it's a question of how much detail has to be calculated. They did an initial exercise at the aggregate level, but then there was a feeling that people will ask for more disaggregated work. So some exercise has been done in looking at what can be disaggregated. In the meantime, we had done the supply use table, so some of that information had also to be built into the exercise, so our work got a little slowed down. But it's as I told you at all times, it's a research exercise and it invariably gets hostage to a whole bunch of current work which gets taken up.
Not a different question. Just wanted a clarification on, you said that the nominal growth rate has slowed down because of the WPI deflator moving from negative to positive?
Yeah, that is correct. I don't have the deflators anywhere here. Yeah, why don't I? Just press the mic.
Manufacturing, the WPI growth was 2.3%. And in the last quarter, in the second quarter of the last year, it was negative, -1.8. So obviously, when you deflate it by a negative number, you get a higher figure of constant prices. Whereas if you deflate by a higher deflator, you get a lower figure. So the growth rate gets affected by that. Yes, that's true of maybe like even the WPI, all commodities, wherever it is being applied. Second quarter, the WPI is 3.7. Last year it was minus 4.5. So that is also. That is what Sir mentioned.
Yeah.
And we have had quite a discussion. Thank you, Mr. Anant and your team, and thank you, friends from the media. Thank you.